A patient who recently was treated for atypical pneumonia presents with palpitations and EKG showing polymorphic tachycardia with sinusoidal wave forms. That is the buzzword for torsades. What is the likely electrolyte abnormality this arrhythmia is associated with? Low what? Torsades is related to low magnesium, hypomagnesemia. And that's why, what is the treatment for torsades? Give magnesium, exactly, give magnesium, very good. QT syndromes, either it's a drug or a congenital long QT syndrome, that can predispose you to this ribbon-like pattern, okay? So what are the medications that can predispose you to torsades? Because why? Why do they predispose you to torsades? Because they prolong the QT. The medications are class 1A antiarrhythmics, class 3 antiarrhythmics, macrolides. You know what the suffix of macrolides are? Thromycin, erythromycin. Throw things on the MacBook, throw things on the MacBook. Okay? Antipsychotics. What's TCA? Tricyclic antidepressants, ipramine, and ondansetron, which is Zofran. So what phase of the ventricular action potential does a long QT prolong? A long QT prolongs what phase of the action potential? Well, that is going to be phase 3. It's going to prolong phase 3 of the action potential. And what is phase 3 of the action potential? Well, phase 3 of the action potential is when you close the L-type calcium channels and you start activating the voltage-gated potassium channels. Remember, when you're talking about the action potential, here you have the ventricular action potential, phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, and this is what I'm talking about, baby. This is going to be the activation of the voltage-gated potassium channels. Long QT syndrome, thus, is going to be related to an abnormality of this phase 3 or abnormality of the K channels, which are the rectifying channels. And this leads to polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Remember, long QT was also associated with, what did we say? Torsades, exactly. That ribbon-like pattern can long QT can predispose you to torsades. And long QT can also predispose you to sudden death as well. So now let's talk about Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. A patient presents with a narrow complex tachycardia. Upon further EKG analysis, you see a short PR interval and are suspicious for a reentrant rhythm causing this presentation. Wolff-Parkinson-White, reentrant rhythm. That's a very key buzzword for you to know. Vagal maneuvers are going to be initiated as well. Remember, vagal maneuvers are the first step in what? SVT. Anytime you see a supraventricular tachycardia. What is supraventricular tachycardia? It's narrow complex tachycardia. The first thing you're going to be like is, yo, let me slow down that heart rate real quick. Vagal maneuvers. So what is the likely diagnosis when you're suspecting a short PR, you have supraventricular tachycardia and a reentrant rhythm? That's going to be Wolff-Parkinson-White when you're talking about the reentrant rhythm. And usually Wolff-Parkinson-White patients, they can present in this narrow complex tachycardia, which is supraventricular tachycardia. It's the most common reentrant rhythm. And what medication can exacerbate Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome? What medication can exacerbate Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome? That is going to be calcium channels and beta blockers. Calcium channels and beta blockers because they are going to block the AV node. And when you block the AV node, that rhythm is now going to say, yo, I'm going to go to the bundle of Kent and I'm just going to start firing myself. And so calcium channel blockers and beta blockers are going to exacerbate Wolff-Parkinson-White. So what's the EKG characteristic of Wolff-Parkinson-White? It's that sharp delta upstroke, which is a key buzzword for you to know. And this is the sharp delta upstroke that we're talking about with Wolff-Parkinson-White. Let's talk about AFib. A patient presents with acute onset of dysarthria and unilateral upper extremity weakness. She has a history of rheumatic fever and associated diastolic heart murmur. What diastolic heart murmur would you have with rheumatic fever? Mitral stenosis. She has palpitations. So what is the likely EKG finding that we're talking about here? Anytime you have dilation of the atrium, you want to worry about atrial fibrillation. Dilation of the atrium, you're thinking about atrial fibrillation. It's the absence of P waves, and the buzzword for atrial fibrillation is irregular pattern. So what is the mechanism behind her focal neurologic deficits? Why did she get these focal neurological deficits? Well, what happens is that this goes through Virchow's triad, and USMLE loves to test this. Atrial fibrillation is going to be a quivering above the ventricles, and that quivering leads to stasis, which is one of the triads of Virchow's triad. That stasis can create a clot, and that clot can dislodge to your brain. So stasis and Virchow triad, clot formation and embolization. Patients who have stroke, foot ischemia, renal infarction, these are all, hey, my clot broke off, okay? This is really important for next best step in management is to get an echo, because you can see these embolic phenomena coming from the heart and going to the foot, the brain, or the kidneys. So the likely site in this patient is going to be the MCA distribution, because the MCA distribution comes here on the side of the brain. Portion of the jugular pressure tracing may be absent in an AFib patient. This goes back to your cardiac cycle. Remember, there's no contraction. There's no contraction of that atria, and so that would be A wave. Very good. All right, so just a little bit of electrophysiology review, the EKG basics. We talk about the P wave. P wave is going to represent atrial depolarization. Remember, this is the electrical activity that precedes the mechanical activity. Electrical activity that precedes the mechanical activity. You have the PR interval, and that's the time going from the SA node to the AV node. And what would tachycardia do to this interval? What would tachycardia do to this PR interval? Well, it would shorten it. Exactly, it would shorten it. Then you have the QRS. QRS represents ventricular depolarization. Ventricular depolarization occurs right before ventricular contraction. And then you have the QT interval, okay? It's a QT. It's a real QT, all right? So that represents the mechanical contraction of the ventricles. And then you have the T wave. The T wave is going to represent ventricular repolarization, and that's when the ventriculars are just about to relax. And the ST segment is when the ventricles are fully depolarized. Ventricles are fully depolarized in the ST segment. So what is the basic conduction pattern? You go from SA, AV, bundle of His, and Purkinje. That should be a review to you all. What artery supplies the SA and the AV node? What artery? The right side artery or the left side artery? It's the right side artery, exactly. It's the nodal artery, and that's going to be a branch of the RCA. So RCA occlusions, i.e. if you have a myocardial infarction in your RCA, that can cause arrhythmias due to infarction of these SA and AV nodes, okay? Because the RCA supplies these nodes. The frequency of depolarization is greatest in which node? Frequency of depolarization is going to be greatest in the SA node. Remember, it's the pacemaker of the heart. Boom, 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 boom. What makes the action potential of the nodal tissue unique? What makes the action potential of the nodal tissue compared to this ventricular tissue unique? It's basically phase zero. Phase zero in the ventricular action potential, that is determined by sodium. When we're talking about the nodal action potential, that's going to be phase zero, but it's going to be determined by what, guys? Calcium. Very good. Calcium. Excellent. So remember, funny channels are also in nodal tissue, right? And these funny channels are sodium channels, and they have a high resting membrane potential. So what has the slowest rate of automaticity? The slowest rate of automaticity is Purkinje fibers, and that's like that classic question. When you hit out the SA, then you hit out the AV, then the bundle of His and the Purkinjes take over, and they are really slow. Where is the fastest rate of conduction? Fastest rate. Whoa, 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 whoa. Rate of conduction. Rate of conduction means meters per second through. Okay? And that's going to be the Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers say, yo, I'm going to take this electrical activity and boom, am I going to fire it through? So where's the slowest rate of conduction? Remember, conduction and automaticity, you know this is different concepts, right? Slowest rate of conduction, that's going to be in the AV node. Has anybody heard of the AV nodal delay? Ooh, AV nodal delay? Man, it must be a little bit slow. Okay? So the mnemonic in terms of conduction is going to be park at Ventura Ave, which means that you have the Purkinje fibers the fastest, atria the next fastest, then you have the ventricles, and finally the AV node. And that's going to be the rate of conduction. So a 58-year-old man with supraventricular tachyarrhythmias, refractory to pharmacotherapy, gets ablation of an accessory excitatory pathway in the atrial endocardium. Woohoo! He gets it ablated. Which area should be avoided to leave the SA node intact? What area should that electrophysiologist not touch? He should not touch the junction where the SVC and the right atrium plug into each other. That junction he shouldn't touch, because that is where the SA node is located. Well, if he touches a little bit, you can get atrial fibrillation, you can get bradycardia, you may even get atrial flutter. A patient presents with a heart rate of 200. Fast or slow? Fast, very good. He has multitude of P waves on EKG. What is the likely diagnosis? Multitude of P waves, that's going to be atrial flutter. And the key buzzword is a sawtooth appearance on EKG. You're going to treat this like atrial fibrillation. You're going to use rate control and then rhythm control, but let's keep focused on just recognizing atrial flutter. Now, the key thing for atrial flutter is ablation of the re-entry pathway, and that's going to be the definitive treatment like many of these arrhythmias. So now let's talk about heart block. You know how I think about heart block? One of the ways I like to teach it is, when do I actually have to care about thinking about heart block? Well, one way heart block is going to present on your USMLE is grouped beatings. They'll give you an EKG and you'll see beats together, then no beats, then beats together, no beats. So grouped beatings is a key buzzword when you're talking about heart block, okay? So in absence of QRS complex, that's going to be really important when you're thinking about heart block. And basically what heart block is that the top part of the heart and the bottom part of the heart aren't communicating, and i.e. it's called heart block. Which heart block requires pacemaker treatment? Which one's kind of scary? That's going to be second degree heart block, Mobitz type 2. What is Mobitz type 1 called? What is it? Wenckebach, exactly. Mobitz type 1 is called Wenckebach. Very good. Okay, so second degree heart block, Mobitz type 2 in particular needs a pacemaker. And the arrhythmia characteristic of Mobitz type 2, remember, Mobitz type 2, you have what? Fixed PR intervals and then a drop beat. Fixed PR intervals and then a drop beat. So that is going to be Mobitz type 2. I think about 1, 2, fixed, 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 drop, fixed, 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 drop. Okay? How is Mobitz type 1 different? Well, Mobitz type 1, you don't need a pacemaker. And Mobitz type 1, yes, it is a second degree heart block. Everybody buzz that into your mind. It is a second degree heart block. However, the arrhythmia characteristic is different because it's longer till you drop. That's a magic of Wenckebach. Okay? So progressive lengthening of the PR interval, and then you have a dropped beat. What infectious etiology is related to heart block? Well, you think about Lyme disease. All right, heart block, let's keep going. 79-year-old male, he comes 30 minutes after LOC. What's LOC? Loss of consciousness for 30 seconds. He's alert but dizzy, no urinary or fecal incontinence. Pulse is going to be 40 beats per minute. Blood pressure is 92/56. Physical exam shows no tongue biting. Lungs are clear. You have a variable intensity S1. He's alert and oriented ×3. However, EKG shows third degree AV block. Good or bad? Bad, bad, right? Insertion of a transvenous pacemaker. And remember that when your top and bottom portions of the heart, they're not going to be communicating, you can present with whoa, 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 right? And that's why the differential can be arrhythmia. Differential can also be seizures. Okay, so keep all of this stuff in mind. A 4-year-old child presents to the intensive care unit with unresponsiveness. Good or bad place? Bad, right? Yeah, no bueno, okay. He has poor perfusion and a heart rate of 30. Fast or slow? Slow, let's get pumped up, guys. His grandmother has a history of acute coronary syndrome and is pharmacologically treated. Yay, grandma. Patient is started on a medication which affects ACH. What's ACH? Medication that affects acetylcholine transmission. And what is this likely medication? You're bradycardic. What drug are you going to give? Say the word atropine. Say the word atropine, because atropine is an anti-muscarinic. You have a slow heart rate. What's causing the slow heart rate? Parasympathetic. What's causing the slow heart rate? A lot of acetylcholine. Block the acetylcholine. Atropine, anti-muscarinic. So what other presentation is atropine the correct answer for? Isn't that a good way to integrate other test questions on atropine? Well, atropine is also going to be the correct answer for a patient like a farmer or a child who presents with organophosphate poisoning. Remember organophosphate poisoning? They're going to be leaky everywhere, right? They're going to be leaky everywhere because it's a high what? Parasympathetic load. It's a lot of acetylcholine. And so you use atropine to block that acetylcholine. What symptoms would an overdose of atropine? Now, overdose of atropine. This is very like second nature now to you. Atropine is anti-parasympathetic. You guys have been learning parasympathetic and sympathetic since AP Bio in high school. True? Absolutely. Okay? So, symptoms of a atropine overdose would be this mnemonic. Blind as a bat, because you lose accommodation. Hot as a hare, because you mess with temperature regulation. Mad as a hatter, because it causes CNS toxicity. Red as a beet, because you're going to have increased amounts of temperature and flushing. Full as a flask, you're going to not be leaky, but dry, urinary retention, and tachycardia, because you're blocking your parasympathetic drive. So the note here is that you would not block excitation of skeletal muscle. Why? Because skeletal muscle is going to be nicotinic mediated. And what is atropine? It is a muscarinic. Remember, muscarinic receptors are what? G-protein couple receptors. That's high yield for you to know. Nicotinic receptors are going to be what? Ion channels. Ion channels. Beautiful. All right?